Welcome in. We are live here on this Thursday, Southeastern 16, our Thursday football live stream. Jay Greeson, I'm Chase Robinson, and we're excited today. We're going to talk a little NFL draft that is right around the corner. We got the combine going on right now, and once again, some SEC players with possibility to go pretty high in the draft and make some noise there in the NFL. So to do that, we're going to talk with Joe DeLeone. He is with the Ruffino and Joe show, also with the Hack City podcast, part of the Believe Network. So, Joe, it's great to have you on today. How are you?
Doing great. Managed to get to Indianapolis successfully, and drills are kicking off soon. So we're going to get to see how these guys are going to perform. But couldn't be happier. Second time I've getting to cover the combine and being here in Indy. It's a real football lover's just dream getting to be around and be around team personnel and to be around media members. Hopefully there's no more fights at Starbucks though. That would be great.
Well, yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
Well, if they let everybody use the restroom, then maybe we could get in there and have a cup of coffee and go. Well, never mind. But I got to tell you, I mean, the combine, certainly everybody makes the underwear Olympics joke, but in the terms of the two most popular sports in America, this is the intersection. The people who love college football, first and foremost, they want their guys to go be good. The people who, the vast majority of the country, the NFL is the biggest monolith in pop culture. So these people are now, I love the draft, Joe, and I'm so excited to talk to you. I'm going to quit talking now, which is a real accomplishment for me, because I just want to, Chase and I just want to bounce questions off of you, because especially in terms of the SEC could have half of the first 3 rounds picked.
Yeah, the SEC's loaded with prospects like they are every single year. And maybe we're not seeing the same like typical big quarterback names leading in the SEC discussion. But if you asked any football fan and they had no knowledge of what prospects were in the class, if you asked them to guess which position groups are dominated by the SEC, they'd probably answer with defensive line, linebacker, and offensive line. And that's absolutely true this year. There are some athletic freaks. There's a lot of guys that I'm sure that we're going to discuss today on the show. There is a lot of talent because we know that the big dogs, the big mauling athletic monsters are recruited to go play in the South.
A couple of players, and we'll get to some of these throughout our time with you, but I want to start with Jalen Milroe because he's interesting to me. Down at the Senior Bowl in Mobile, I was not there, and I know you were, Joe. Just talk with some guys like at practice, he didn't look good throwing the ball, and so I'm interested where he fits into the draft, what he needs to do to raise his draft stock, and what's that looking like for Jalen Milroe as far as the NFL goes.
Personally, I really love Jalen Milroe as the prospect. Like if we just forget everything else and we just look at him as a player, there's a lot of inconsistency, absolutely. But the highs are just so exciting. It's not a direct comparison, but it's kind of like with Anthony Richardson, where Anthony Richardson coming out of Florida, athletically gifted young man, would show off these great highlight plays and then would make some brutal mistakes. Jalen Milroe, for him to improve his stock, I really wanted to see him run. I wanted to see him do as much athletic testing as possible because Anthony Richardson confirmed himself as a top 10 guy because he went out and did something that nobody else has ever done. We know Jalen Milroe has the long speed, and he's apparently opting not to run at the combine. And that's just really disappointing for me because he's not going to throw the best. He didn't throw the best at the Senior Bowl. The decision-making, the anticipation, the touch, it's all over the map. You'll see the beautiful throw where he'll drop it right in the bucket, and then you'll see the instance where he'll rip as hard as he can, like a simple drag route or a 5 to 10 yard in that does not need that same level of juice on the ball. His way of boosting the conversation was going out there and showing for these teams that prioritize and like having athletic quarterbacks, especially in a year where the best quarterback play came from 2 specific guys who are dynamic runners, Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts. It could have done so much for him. And not to like knock Jalen Milroe, but one of the biggest negatives that I hear from him in this interview process, and I hope it's not true, but apparently he's really struggling in showing that his knowledge of the game and how he's doing on the whiteboard. Hopefully there's improvement there, but knowing that he's not as caught up as some of these other prospects that are better decision makers, it could hurt him not having that athletic testing.
To your point, he has thrown daggers in buckets because I'm an Auburn graduate and we all remember 4th and 31. That said, I'm going to stay at the same position. Can Jackson Dart be this year's Bo Nix?
I certainly think so. I've like kind of ended up on both sides of the spectrum with Jackson Dart, where he could end up going in the middle of the first round. But he feels like one of those prospects this year where there's going to be a lot of buzz built up, but because the NFL is going to be really cautious.
Could he be Will Levis? Do you think he's going to be more Bo Nix or more Will Levis?
I stand more on Will Levis, and Will Levis's fall was a little bit you kind of heard because he was really like overbearing personality. And I don't think that's Jackson Dart. I think he's going to be somebody who we constantly hear because the NFL is going to try and pump to their media sources that they want to create this market in order to create a trade up situation, a trade in situation, whatever it might be. But like I said, there should be cautiousness from these NFL teams that most of these guys outside of the top two of Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, that they're really going to be projected as backups. But if there's one guy on day 2 that goes on to be a starter, I think it is Jackson Dart. I keep comparing him to Derek Carr. I think he can absolutely be Derek Carr, get drafted in the 2nd round by a team that needs a starter, but maybe is looking ahead to next year and is thinking, let's see what we get out of this. Maybe this doesn't work, but because he's such a high floor player and he's an underrated athlete, and he's really precise and a strong decision maker. Like he checks all the boxes, just doesn't have the big arm and also has some rough interceptions that he's thrown on film. He could end up starting in a situation for a team that's kind of in a messy roster spot. So him ending up like Derek Carr, who's had a great career and it's kind of tailing off towards the end here for, his time with the Saints. I think that's a realistic projection for him to land instead of him being a first rounder.
We're live here, so if you want to drop questions in as you're watching, feel free to do that. You can comment your questions. We'll try to get to those as we move through. Joe, I want to hit you with one more quarterback, and that's Quinn Ewers of Texas. Where do you see him going, and do you see him being a good fit in the NFL?
One, I think it was really smart I don't know if it was directly from Quinn Ewers or just from his agent that put this out, but I remember seeing this week that it was emphasized that he was playing with like a serious oblique injury. And we knew that during the college football playoff that he had the oblique injury, but it was kind of downplayed because you don't want to put that out to your opponent. So knowing that impacted his performance, it felt like during the college football playoff, his ball just didn't have that same zip. And simple understanding of throwing motions, your oblique is going to get engaged when you're trying to throw the ball, especially if you're getting hit and you're taking on contact. His struggles in spurts throughout that period in the SEC championship game, it provides really good context. I'm admittedly kind of out on Quinn Ewers. The one thing that helps him, and I think a lot of people forget, he's played so much ball. He's like just barely 21 years old. He is really young because he's a guy who reclassified when he went to Ohio State. So that helps him. But as a Giants fan and as somebody who watched a lot of Daniel Jones and knew like really early on that, hey, all the physical stuff's there, the decision-making is just not. And at a certain point, you see so many issues with just not getting it. There's a difference between when you're watching a quarterback who makes the big plays and then makes the dumb mistakes of just not knowing and understanding, or maybe not having enough experience to make and evaluate things in a better way to set up your team to succeed. And to what Quinn Ewers has done, where just really untimely turnovers, taking risks when he doesn't need to, ripping the ball into double coverage like he did against Arizona State. Those types of decisions, I worry, are things that I don't know if can like truly be coached out of him. So what happened with Daniel Jones? And I'm not saying that's like a total comparison to him to Daniel Jones, but it's that same issue of decision-making where at a certain point when you've played so much football and you've started as much as he has, it starts to get frustrating of trying to make the case for him of being like, hey, eventually he's going to figure it out because he's got the big arm. He can throw on the run. Former highest rated recruit ever at one point because of the tools that he has. There is a potential world if he goes somewhere early day 3 and he gets a shot to start that he could end up working out because he's physically gifted enough. But I think most realistically, he's probably going to be a backup for the very early part of his career.
So in honor of, well, not in honor, I guess, but on this sad day that we've learned of Gene Hackman's passing, and in honor of the wonderful sports movie, The Replacements, thought I was going somewhere different, but that's okay. The Replacements, which was robbed for an Academy Award, you're telling me that Quinn Ewers is Shane Falco, is what you're telling me. So
I mean, that works. I think out of any comp, I keep seeing all these crazy comps that like Jay Cutler's been thrown out there for him. I like that a lot better. I like the Replacements comp. I think that's a lot more creative.
What SEC player is going to stand to make the most money, not named Arian Smith this week?
I think it's Shamar Stewart. The guy that he's paralleled with is going to be Mykel Williams from Georgia. Mykel Williams, for some reason, not testing, which I don't get. He would have been a physical freak. And the guy that he's effectively competing with, Shamar Stewart, is supposed to be testing today. He is somebody, you see it on film. You see all the tools, the get off, the bend, the change of direction, the physicality, the way that he's going to look in the on-field drills. He's one of these players, kind of reminds me of Trayvon Walker not that long ago, who came out of Georgia and was drafted first overall with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'll even go as far as to say this. We're already starting to get the whole rigmarole with Abdul Carter's injuries that he underwent at the end of the year at Penn State. If he takes a tiny little bit of a slide, it wouldn't surprise me that Shamar Stewart doesn't end up being the first defensive player selected. And that rise, it starts today. It starts today with that. Now, my one pause with Shamar Stewart, I get a little wary with guys that just don't have consistent disruption on film and don't have consistent production on film. And when we watch Shamar Stewart, you get like really excited about the highs, but there's a lot of times where he just gets caught up on a block and the play's over and he's completely out of the mix. So there's a world he goes on to be an all-pro defender, and I think that the NFL is going to be seeking that out. But for me, he's not my top-rated defender because I just want to see what he can do and develop first, and rather go with the guy who has the production in Abdul Carter.
Wide receiver Luther Burden of Missouri. Do you see him going first round? Because look, his numbers this year were not as good as I thought they would be, but still good year and a good year in 23. Do you see him going first round? How do you see Luther Burden in the NFL?
I absolutely do think that he's a first round pick. This receiver class, to put it very frankly, it's awful. There are really not many good receiver options. There isn't a single guy in this class that I would classify as like a number one primary target in an offense. Luther Burden, though, leads the discussion of like the perfect guy stepping into a situation as a secondary or tertiary receiver, a guy who can dominate in the slot, as a yak guy who can separate and win in short areas with the ball in his hands. He, to me, I think is going to be really valuable for teams that are looking for those gadget types of players. And when there is limited options on day 2, I think it's going to motivate teams at the end of the first round to go after him. Maybe we even see it a trade back into the end of the first round. The two easiest examples that you can think of are the Miami Dolphins, who there's a little bit of uncertainty what's happening with the Tyreek Hill, who voiced his frustrations at the end of the year. Mike McDaniel, who at one point was Deebo Samuel's offensive coordinator for his best season, and Luther Burden gets directly compared to Deebo Samuel, plugging him into the mix to play off of Jalen Waddle. I think that there's a way to activate that. Or the other option, Deebo Samuel has also been brought up as a guy who is seeking a trade and wants to leave the San Francisco 49ers. Now, I know they have other needs, but if they wanted to trade back into the end of the first round, he's still on the board around pick 25 or later. That's an easy plug and play replacement, especially if you could get really good draft capital for Deebo when you trade him.
Now, one, I completely agree with you that I think the Burton kid is going to be a first rounder. I also think the McMillan kid from Arizona might be, but it is a really bad wide receiver class to the point that I think the Penn State tight end is probably going to get picked ahead of both of them. But to my question, in terms of the SEC conversation, if I offered you Will Johnson or the field among SEC players to be guaranteed a 10-year NFL career, who are you taking?
I'm taking Will Johnson, and that's a really interesting angle to look at this. And I think that you're bringing up the really important thing to talk about with Will Johnson that I don't think enough people appreciate. For some reason, there's been a little bit of just a general slide in his projection. The reason why a guy like that lasts so long is because his instincts are through the roof. He has unbelievable instincts for the position. So much so, and I implore anybody, go on YouTube, pull up his highlights. There are interceptions that he has where the ball is not even out of the quarterback's hand. He hasn't even moved to trigger to throw, to go into his throwing motion. And he's pulling off interceptions because he's reading, he's changing direction as quickly as possible, and he's come down with it. It's all over his film. The USC game, perfect example. 2 years prior against Ohio State, he had a similar type play where Kyle McCord, before he just started looking in the direction, I think, of Marvin Harrison Jr., and he bears down on the ball and he comes down with it. If Will Johnson either gets banged up or towards the end of his career when he's not as athletic as he is right now, he's tall enough and physical enough to win, and that decision-making, the just natural cerebral play style is something that would help him when he's 32, 33 years old.
He's my favorite player in the draft.
He should be. He's one of my favorite guys too. It's weird. I've done a couple of mock drafts. If you talk about Will Johnson and you say he should be a top 5 pick, he's one of these guys that I keep getting pushback for. And I'm like, why are we? Malachi Starks is the other one. And I'm sure that there was an intention to bring him up, but Malachi Starks, amazing decision maker. I think that so many people get caught up in the athleticism that of these guys that are less productive, that they don't want to pay attention to these guys that have highly, highly decorated careers for some reason.
I want to talk about Tennessee edge James Pearce. And again, we saw a little drop off, I feel like, this year, especially in his sack numbers. What does his draft stock right now look like?
Yeah, coming into the season, there was a lot of speculation that hey, this guy could be the first overall pick, depending on where he is, depending on who's picking first overall. He was, and the reason for that was insanely long, really fluid, change of direction, really underrated and unexpected power for a thinner framed edge rusher that needed to add a little bit more weight. The hope was coming into the season was, hey, can we watch this guy develop more pass rush moves? Can he be less of an athlete to win and more of a tactician to win? And we didn't get enough of that. We didn't get enough of that progression. I still think he's a driving name in the edge conversation. I still personally would take him as the second or third edge prospect in this group, because if you can activate those tools, and we also do have more production compared to guys like Mykel Williams or Shamar Stewart, I'd be willing to make that move. His lack of production this year, though, anyone who watched Tennessee football or watched SEC football this year know that they were rotating. They had the deepest defensive line in the country, and that was their success. They were so successful because they had so many different guys that they could rotate in, because they were trying to keep guys fresh, and that was how they were winning. It was the freshness they were able to deploy on the field. So his lack of production was just having a really dang good team that he was playing on. So I'm not worried about that. James Pearce Jr. should be a top 15 pick, and I'd even go as far as to say I think teams should consider him as early as top 7. Maybe he ends up with a team like the Jets, or he ends up going to a team like the Raiders.
All right, Joe, one, your content's amazing, and we greatly appreciate your time. But I know we're on a kind of little bit of a time crunch here, and I've got a half dozen names that I kind of want to rapid fire. I'm going to throw one. Chase may throw one. Let's kind of get some more Michael Chang off the back wall, kind of fast tennis action here. Kyle Kennard's second day, steal?
Oh, I think so. I mean, we're talking about a guy that had insane sack numbers this year. Great hands, great experience. I think he could be somebody at the end of the third round. And it kind of kills him that there's so many talented pass rushers in this class. But
Right.
if there's a prospect that I'm talking about, kind of like Nick Bonito a couple of years ago, who came out of Oklahoma, if there's a guy that I'm thinking of, like, why wasn't he picked sooner? I think that Kyle Kennard could be that guy.
Will Campbell, LSU. Where do you see him going?
This is where my controversy is going to happen. So my co-host in Ruffino and Joe show, Blake Ruffino, big LSU guy, he craps on me because I'm not more excited about Will Campbell. Very high floor player. I think he goes on to be a consistent Pro Bowler, but I think because he's under that 33-inch threshold and he's not like an overwhelming athlete, good athlete, but he's not like crazy fluid, flexible, like insane mover that we've seen from some of these other guys like Olu Fashanu last year. I think that he plugs in at guard and you drop him there, and then 15 years later, we're talking about maybe a Hall of Fame career. But there's other guys that are going to go a little bit higher because tackle's a more premier position. And there's just a couple of other players like Josh Simmons and Kelvin Banks that I think provide different qualities that are going to be more sought after by the NFL. But still, this is a top 15 pick in this class because there's not a lot of very good offensive linemen.
Same city. When we redraft this draft in 2035, everybody's going to say, what the hell did we think? And why did we not take Mason Taylor sooner?
I like Mason Taylor a lot. He blew me away at the Senior Bowl. His athleticism shows up a lot. If there's a guy like you're talking about here, if there's a guy that like in a couple of years we're saying like, I don't know if he's never really going to pan out to be in 1,000-yard tight end. But if we're talking about somebody who lands on a squad and he's their number one tight end and he's just a really consistent option for a playoff team, that to me is totally Mason Taylor. I think he deserves more respect in this class, especially with how weak the tight end class starts to get when we look at these day 2 and day 3 options.
There is a question I want to get to in the comments. This is not SEC, but he wants to know why Scadaboo is so low on the draft boards going late third round.
So Cam Scadaboo, I'm really curious to see how he tests during the combine, because the concern generally when you watch him, you see the physicality, you see the unreal contact balance, you see the way that he delivers contact and is willing to hit guys, but he doesn't really have that top end speed. Like he doesn't have that separation type speed. There are plenty of times on film where he breaks away and then he gets caught. It happens all the time. I think that he is going to thrive, and he should go in the end of the third, early fourth, thriving in a situation as an early down ball carrier or a guy that's a really good receiving back. He is going to be underrated. And Cam Scadaboo is somebody who like I have always pushed because I found him and like started watching his tape when he was at Sacramento State. And I've been pushing him this entire time. And I've said that kid's an NFL running back. And I kind of agree with the hype that he should go sooner than just late day 3. But if he tests well, he has a good 40 time. It's around 4.6 or better. And if he has good short agility numbers, which apparently he could have a rise throughout this class.
All right. I hate to use big English words, especially since I've only know about half of their definitions because I went to Auburn. But it feels oxymoronic to say an Alabama linebacker is underrated or undervalued. But I think Jahdae Campbell's going to be a 10-year dude in this league, and everybody looks up and goes, yeah, we should have known that.
He's my linebacker 1 right now. I love Jahdae Campbell. He is, and when I tweeted out his highlights, and people keep like occasionally resharing it, I tweeted out, I just said, Jahdae Campbell likes to hit people, therefore I like Jahdae Campbell. And he picks up speed so quickly. He's so downhill. That's what I like in my linebackers. His decision-making sometimes is a little erratic. Sometimes he'll guess wrong and it leads to, giving up big plays. But I like linebackers that are going to just make a decision and go. Make a mistake at 100 miles an hour.
And to that point, I've seen multiple places where he falls to the end of the first round and the Eagles get him. And God. Of course they do, because they take every really athletic, hard-hitting defensive SEC dude, and now they're going to win Super Bowls.
I would be upset if, as a Giants fan, again, I would be upset if he ended up with the Eagles, because that's like I project my latest mock draft. He makes a lot of sense. Or Princely Umami Ellen from Ole Miss, who's also an insane athlete coming out of the SEC. But the thing with Campbell,
that's actually my given name, Prince Umali Ellen. It's a family name. It's a family name.
Oh man. But I like Campbell though. I like him a lot. He's my number 1 linebacker. I think that he needs more love for sure.
Well, Joe, we're about out of time here. We'll definitely get you back on. This was great conversation, and we want to continue this sometime. So we'll get you on again very soon. Joe DeLeone joining us. You can hear him on the Ruffino and Joe show, Hack City podcast, all on the Believe Network. Joe, we appreciate you coming on today, man, talking some NFL draft, and we'll definitely do it again soon.
Yeah, I had a blast chopping up with you guys. So, whenever again soon, I'm available, and I can't wait to hop on again.
Sounds good. Thanks, Joe. That is Joe DeLeone. And Jay, we'll spend the next couple of minutes just kind of recapping a little bit of that, because I thought that was really good stuff from him. And I know you're a big guy on the NFL draft. What did you think about some of the things that he put out there?
Well, I think, golly, so many things. And maybe when we recap after the draft, either whether it's Joe or somebody else, and we're breaking this down, I think there's a real missed opportunity. And he kind of touched on it with Jalen Milroe about not working out. I mean, yeah. I understand Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. And if you're the top 1 or top 2 at your position, especially at a quarterback, you may want to throw on campus and do those things with wide receivers you're familiar with and surroundings you're comfortable with and those other things. But Jalen Milroe and Jackson Dart have a huge opportunity this week with those guys not working out to elevate themselves into that first-round discussion. I mean, I've read multiple stories that say Bo Nix was a day 2 guy until he went to the combine and showed everybody he could be a franchise quarterback. I mean, and you know what? There's a lot to lose for those top 1 or 2 guys, especially at that position in Indianapolis at the Underwear Olympics. But there's a lot to gain for those guys who are not 1 or 2. And I'm surprised Jalen Milroe didn't go work out, to be quite honest, because in a year, in an era, in a time where if you can run, they'll find an offense to incorporate you. Jalen Milroe can run. I mean, he may not show up and be the fastest dude in the world, but with the ball in his hand, he's very effective. So I thought that kind of took me by surprise. I think his awareness of the unbelievable depth of the defensive line in this draft, and so many of those guys are SEC dudes. I mean, think about it this way. We talked about 5 different SEC defensive linemen, and we didn't even get to Walter Nolan, who was a monster. Yeah,
that's very true. To you, Jay, what would you say? And again, we're sitting here February 27th, so a couple of months away from the draft. As you sit here right now, who would you say does Shedeur go first to you? Like, who's second?
No. I don't think you can go first, especially in Tennessee. You've got a first-year GM, which means if you're gonna hit your first draft pick on a QB1, he better be the guy, because in 3 years they're either going to have to extend him or they're going to get rid of both of you. And if you think Shedeur is him, and I don't, he could be, but I think if you're going to go 1-1 and use it on a QB1, you better feel a hell of a lot better about it. I mean, I felt better about Caleb Williams, and we saw how much he struggled, than I do about Shedeur Sanders, or Cam Ward. And I'm not saying Will Levis is the answer for the Titans. I mean, I don't know what the Browns do at 2. I think Abdul Carter is the best pick in this draft. I think he's going to be the best pro. And if you're the Titans, it makes a whole lot of sense, because you're then building across a defensive line that'll have Jeffrey Simmons and a couple other dudes, not unlike the Eagles. But that said, if the Raiders want to give you 3 first-rounders to move from 6 to 1, I'm figuring out a way to fly to Boulder, Colorado, pack Shedeur Sanders' bags, and get him to Las Vegas, and I'll do it on my own dime.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Again, we will be talking more draft, the combine going on now as we get closer to that happening. And yeah, I thought Joe was great. Really good information. He's part of the Believe Network, just as we are. Ruffino and Joe show, also Hack City Podcast. He does a lot of NFL film study with the A to Z Network, so he is very in tune, and we appreciate him for coming on with us today, and appreciate everyone for watching. Any parting thoughts before we get out of here today, Jay?
I am always here, unless my kids have an athletic event or I've got some sort of church thing to do. If you want to just pull up some impromptu draft talk, who's got two thumbs and wants to be a part of it? This guy. So yes, I'm all in for the next month plus of draft talk.
All right. Well, I'll remember that. He's Jay Greeson. I'm Chase Robinson. We are Southeastern 16. Thank you so much for everyone for watching. Hit the like button, and if you have not already, subscribe to our channel. That's where you get all the content we put out: football, basketball, baseball. You'll see Edwards and Greeson on there as well. Everything right there on Southeastern 16. So subscribe, like the videos, drop a comment on here as well, and we can get to those in our next video. But thanks so much for watching. We will see you next time here on Southeastern.